Hi, good evening. I'm Mike Knetter, and I'd like to welcome you to our special event this evening for Bascom Hill Society members with Chancellor Rebecca Blank. It's a real pleasure to have the Chancellor with us tonight. Universities are quite unusual among organizations in grappling with this pandemic. As you think about it, there are a lot of organizations where it's kind of full speed ahead, but work from home, or most people working from home. And then unfortunately, many other organizations, it's no speed ahead. They can't really open because they have to be in person. It's a service organization, and it just isn't possible. And of course, we sit in this unusual middle ground as a university where it's possible that we could open, but the question is how. And I guess you and your team have been grappling with just enormous decisions this summer, many decisions. It's probably years worth of decisions that you've had to make in a matter of months. And you're going to tell us a bit about the shutdown and now the plans for reopening tonight. And I know our generous donors really appreciate you taking time to be with us. It's great for you to be able to hear their questions. And I look forward to a very lively exchange tonight in the Q&A. But we're going to begin with Chancellor Blank giving us an overview of what's happened and how she sees the road ahead. And it's a very critical time for the university. And Chancellor, we are really fortunate to have you at the helm. I'm glad that we've got a seasoned veteran in charge here, and you've just been doing a wonderful job with your team. So thank you, and take it away.
Thank you, Mike. And thanks to the Alumni Association and all the work that they and all of our loyal alumni do to stay connected to the university. The Bascom Hill Society dinner is always one of the highlights of the year, and I'm sorry that we aren't going to be together this year, but we're going to do it virtually instead. So here we go. I was asked to talk about sort of what's been happening on campus, the shutdown, and then the reopening and what we're planning for the fall, how that's all going. But before I start that, I want to acknowledge that very little that I'm going to talk about tonight would be possible without the support of alumni to the university. In the last 2 years alone, Bascom Hill Society members have endowed 13 faculty chairs and professorships. And that commitment has been particularly important in the last several months when some of those faculty have been central to our research on COVID-19. For instance, if you go to the slide, Professor Josh Kuhn, he's the Tom and Margaret Pyle Chair at the Margaret Center. And when New York was inundated with COVID-19 cases, Josh was asked to devise a way to predict, based on the analysis of blood samples, which patients were likely to require hospitalization. It's work that's ultimately going to be leading to better treatments. Similarly, we have Professor Victor Zavala. If you go to the next slide, he is the Baldwin DePra Professor of Chemical and Biological Engineering. When parents suddenly found themselves homeschooling their children, Victor in engineering worked with our field day lab to build free educational video games. His latest one is based on some of the water research at UW. It's called Lakeland. And players try to build a town with farms and factories without polluting the lake on which they sit. And thousands of students have been playing this over the last several months. Victor and Josh are just two examples of the great faculty who are supported by our alums, and I thank you for all of that. I would also note our alums have been very generous with regard to scholarships, and the Chancellor Scholarship Fund for low-income and underrepresented students of color is one that is near and dear to my heart. Some of you may know the foundation right now has a one-to-one match for anyone who wants to create a new Chancellor Scholarship or to enlarge an existing one. And we encourage, particularly at this moment in time, gifts that are going to help us expand access to talented students of color. So let me launch into the discussion of the evening, which is what's been happening on campus. And if you pull up the next slide, everything that makes UW-Madison such a rich educational experience is about interactions. It's faculty who see each other in the seminars or run into each other walking across the campus, or it's students talking as they enter early classrooms or late at night in the dorm, or interacting in student organizations that really add to what an education is and why residential education is so valuable. And of course, all of that has been threatened for the last 4 months. That hasn't been happening. And our goal over these summer months has been to put together a plan for the fall that lets at least some of that be recovered, some of that be experienced by students and faculty who will be here on campus. So it's been a busy time. And if you turn to the next slide, we closed campus very fast. The Wednesday before spring break, we announced we were moving all 8,000 classes to remote instruction. And less than 2 weeks later, 97.5% of our classes were operating remotely. And I have to really thank the faculty and the students and the staff who are incredibly resilient and adaptable. This was a big lift by a lot of people, changing entire teaching modes, adapting how you were teaching and what, and how you got materials across and what you asked of students. And our faculty did it really well. Go to the next slide. We largely closed our dorms down. Most students left, a few stayed, particularly some international students who either it wasn't safe to go home or they couldn't get home. Everyone except essential workers on campus were sent home and either telecommuted or were put on furlough. And almost all laboratories, except those that were COVID related, were closed. Faculty finished the semester teaching from home. You can go to the next slide. So closing was a big lift. I have to say, closing down a big research university turns out to be really hard, and it took us 2 months to do it thoroughly and well. And then we immediately started planning for reopening. And reopening is an even bigger lift. We are not going to have a normal semester in the fall or probably in the spring either. But we're going to have a semester that we think is a serious educational experience. And we've been working hard to design that and plan it. There are a lot of moving parts to this. Lots and lots of people on campus have been busy. I was in a conversation with some of my fellow presidents and chancellors from around the country several weeks ago, and this was early June. One of them said, it's sort of like being handed the Manhattan Project and told you have to deliver final results by August 15th. And I have to say it has felt that way sometimes. So let me tell you about our plans. If you move to the next slide. We have a full curriculum planned, but we're going to be teaching in what we call a hybrid mode. That means some classes are online, some classes are in person. Our large classes will be online, but problem sets, your smaller discussion sections might be in person. We hope that most of our smaller classes will be taught in person where possible. There will be students who can't get to campus, we know that. Some international students, some of our domestic students who have health issues that make it unsafe for them to be around other people. And every department will have enough classes online that anyone at any point in their course through the university can find a way to move forward with their degree. We will start as usual the first week of September, but after Thanksgiving, we're all going virtual. We do not want students to scatter all through the country and then come back, particularly at a time where a lot of people predict there may be a surge of new cases. So there'll be 9 days at the end of the semester that will be virtual only, followed by final exams. To give you a sense of what this requires, let me describe our Chemistry 103 and 104 classes. Those are some of the largest classes on campus. About 5,000 students take them over the course of the year. And we do not think that we can run labs in those classes this next year. Our labs are crowded, they're old, they don't always have the ventilation that you need. And so we had a whole bunch of faculty and staff and students working full-time over the last 6 weeks to determine how you can do labs in those chemistry classes without actually coming to a physical lab. And they have all sorts of digital solutions combined with the idea that they're going to have home kits they send home to all students. So some things you can do in your kitchen sink and some things you're going to do on your computer digitally. It's been a major lift, but they've been very creative, and I'm sort of excited to see how this goes. If you go to the next slide. We, of course, really care about the health of people in the classroom. All our classrooms are going to be physically distanced. That means students are sitting at least 6 feet apart. The faculty members will probably be wearing those face shields that you see medical workers with, which allows you to see their face but protects them from the class. All students in class are required to wear masks. That's a must to protect each other, to protect the instructor. Now, when we move to physically distanced classrooms, it means you need a big classroom for 25 students. You need a classroom of 60 or 70 persons that you can physically distance to a class of 25. We don't have enough classrooms to schedule all the classes we want between 8 and 5, Monday through Friday. So I say to my faculty, take a deep breath when I say this. We're scheduling from 8 in the morning until 10 at night, and we're scheduling more courses on Friday than usual, and we may actually schedule a few Saturday courses. As I say, masking is required everywhere. There'll be cleaning supplies in all the classrooms, and any student who wants to clean their desk or their seat before they sit on it, we will have things available for that. Move to the next slide. As I say, we want everyone, and particularly our freshmen, to have some small group learning experiences. Now, we have these things we call the first year interest group, where small groups of students take on topics and work with the professor on this topic over the full year. About 25% of our freshmen do that, but we want something for the other 75%. So we're designing 2 additional, what we call Wisconsin experience classes aimed at freshmen. They will have big lectures online with a host of really great faculty, and then have small group discussions, either in person or online, depending on whether you're on campus or not. One of these is going to key off from our Go Big Read book, which is about the Parkland shooting and how the students at that high school used that shooting to create a major political movement. It's called, I'm not sure what the exact name of the course is. I'm not sure it's named yet. I've been calling it Tragedy to Activism. As you can imagine, they might start with the book, but given the events of the last several months, they're very quickly going to move into a variety of other examples and experiences, from the civil rights movements to what's been happening in recent months of tragedy moving towards political movements and activism. The other experience class is going to be focused on pandemics. What do people care about? What do we know from pandemics? What do we learn medically? How does medical science change? What effects do pandemics have on the economy and on the people who live through them? How do pandemics affect our art and our literature? It's going to be a fascinating class. And between those 2, I think most freshmen are going to find something they want to participate in. So that's just sort of a side comment on some special things we're doing this coming year. Now, at the center of everything this fall has got to be our health protocols. So if you go to the next slide, testing is number 1 on this. And we have worked with a really great group of medical experts from our public health and medical school. And we've developed a 3-part plan. We will have on campus in the fall drop-in testing centers on campus that anyone who's part of our campus community can stop by and utilize. Number 2, what we call surveillance testing, testing of a subsamples of the population each week to make sure that infections are not growing. And the way we have this set up, if we see infections growing, we'll also know in what part of the population that's happening so that we can take some preventative action. And number 3, we have to have targeted testing, particularly for our residence halls and our workers there, so that about every 2 weeks, if you're going to live in the residence halls, if you're going to work there, we're going to require that you get tested. And these 3 things are going to give us, I think, the backbone of testing that we need to stay safe this summer and to identify infection before it gets out of hand. Of course, testing alone is not enough. If you move to the next slide, it only works when it's combined with 5 other health protocols that we are focusing on. Masking. If you're indoors in a public space in Wisconsin from this point through the fall, probably the spring, you have to wear a mask. That includes our employees, that includes our students. As noted, that includes all of the classrooms. And Dane County is, starting Monday, going to be under a masking requirement for all indoor spaces as well. In addition to masking, physical distancing, I see I've got social distancing down. I think the current term is physical distancing. Stay apart from people. Keep that 6-foot distance where you can. And the combination of masking and physical distancing together with testing when needed is what all the medical experts say are the most effective solutions here. Thirdly, cleaning. We're going to be doing a lot of extra cleaning in our buildings. All of these hygiene practices. I always feel like a kindergarten teacher, but the medical people tell us what's the most effective thing you can do. Wash your hands as often as possible. And, we're going to be encouraging that. We're going to ask everyone to monitor for symptoms every morning. If you are symptomatic in any way, don't come to class. Don't come into work. Instead, go get a COVID test. And, at one of those drop-in centers, and stay away until you find out whether you're positive or not. And then finally, we're training a whole number of contact tracers in conjunction with Dane County Health Department, so that when we do find an infection on campus, and it will happen given where we are, that we can trace contacts and isolate people and prevent this from spreading. One of the real concerns are dormitories. So if you move to the next slide, we will be opening our dorms. It's where our freshmen will have to live. They will be somewhat de-densified, but we are sticking with 2 students per room. We're doing all sorts of special cleaning protocols. My people running the dorms say, the dorms are going to be cleaner than any place else students are living. I don't want to insult the parents, but it's certainly going to be cleaner than on most of the apartments off campus that students are living in. As I said, we'll require bi-weekly testing, and we're making some big changes in how dining halls operate, largely grab and go, more distance tables, some plexiglass, so you aren't sitting directly across from someone, and the idea that many people might take their food out and eat it not in the dormitory cafeteria, but someplace else. We do know that there will be people who get sick among our students, and we are maintaining isolation and quarantine space for students to move into if they need. And of course, we will staff that with people who provide food, who provide and with medical personnel. One big question I keep getting asked is, well, are the students going to do this? It's the next slide. I will say one of the silver linings of this big surge in infections we've had in the last several weeks is I think people actually get it, that we can't let down our guard. We have to follow these sorts of health procedures. The infection won't go away until we have a medical solution. We are going to require a behavioral pledge of our students. People have done some research on this in focus groups, and you ask, what is it that's going to get a student to wear a mask? Turns out telling them that it'll protect them from the virus doesn't do it. They all feel pretty invulnerable. What does work is telling them you need to wear a mask for the rest of the community. You need to keep other people safe. You need to keep faculty and staff safe. And students respond to that much more than they respond to fears about themselves. There's another message that actually works with students, which is just, if you don't want to be at home with your parents in your bedroom, if you want to be in college, this is the price of being in college, and you have to wear a mask. And that message actually seems to work as well. We've got a big marketing campaign going with across campus for both employees and students that will really ramp up this fall, that are going to keep reminding people of the health hygiene issues and the need to keep them up. Move to the next slide. We're obviously concerned about employee safety as well as students. I won't say much about this. I know most people on this call are probably more thinking about our education side, but we are going to be de-densifying workspaces, more staggered hours, continuing telework in some cases, doing additional cleaning protocols, like students, employees have to mask, keep their social distance, monitor their symptoms. And for those who have health conditions or are living with people with health conditions, we will work to make reasonable accommodations so that they are protected and safe. Our research front, the next slide, we are just reopening now. In June, we're doing some additional reopening to get our labs open. There are a lot of research that has really been stalled out for the last several months, and we want that to start again. Again, it's not normal lab procedures, more staggered hours, fewer people in some labs, making sure that workspaces are 6 feet apart, asking people to keep masks on if there's someone else in the lab with them. But we aim by early August to have most of our research up and running with all of these health protocols in place. Now, let me turn to the budget. Next slide. The financial problems are very real. And, I worry about these financial problems more than probably almost anything else about this coming fall, because this is worse than any state budget cuts we faced. Our optimistic scenario was, what will we lose if everything is operating normally in the fall, off the spring and the summer? Our estimate was about $150 million. Well, we're not going to have everything operating normally in the fall. So, we're back into our mid-range, and that's close to 300 million. And our worst case scenario, which is a whole bunch of students don't return, and lots of other things happen, is a $500 million financial hit. Part of that includes base budget cuts from the state, which are, I think, going to be very deep. The state's in real financial trouble. They're going to cut all state agencies. I was not happy that the governor lapsed almost $50 million from the UW system in May. That's for the current year, which ends at the end of July. I was particularly unhappy because the governor lapsed 70 million across the state and took almost 50 out of the UW system. That is not our proportional share. Our proportional share should be 20 to 25%. And we are really trying to say, don't do that to us again. Everyone's got to share these cuts. Don't focus on higher ed. That's not acceptable. The next slide shows you a bit of our problem. We have a lot of sources of revenue, and it's one of our strengths. When one revenue source goes down, another revenue source is available. But this is sort of what's happened through the summer. The problem is every revenue source has gone down, right? We had the budget lapse, that's state appropriations. Our research isn't functioning, so we haven't pulled in federal dollars. You only get your research dollars as you spend them. Endowments and gifts are down. Students left out. We had no one in the housing over the summer. Obviously, dining wasn't there. Our summer classes, this was a projection from a couple of months ago, and our summer classes actually are not down 10%. They're actually pulled even, so we have not lost money there. Athletics, as you know, stopped in the middle of March. They're down in terms of revenue, and you can just sort of go around the circle. Every part of the university is in financial trouble. Now, we responded quickly. Next slide. We reduced spending. We've got a hiring and salary freeze in place. Everything that we were going to invest and put new money into next year, we have pulled back. That instead we're going to spend to fill in the hole. And we've imposed furloughs on all of our staff. Between 3 to 6 days, we've done this progressively. Higher income staff have received 6 days of furlough, lower income staff 3 days, and it's a progressive in between. And we've got some areas of the university like housing where there just wasn't much work, and we've done even deeper. People have been laid off 50% or 60% time for much of the last several months. So we had to do this, but by itself, this will get us through the summer. We're going to have to do more if we face deeper cuts and problems in the fall. And I am predicting that we are going to have to do more. Our big focus right now is the fall and getting students here and making sure we can provide them with an experience that, like I say, is going to be different, but not necessarily, you hope not necessarily worse. I mean, sometimes these things bring people together and create memorable experiences. We had a huge application class. So far, we are on track to meet our goals for number of freshmen. People have accepted. They've put down deposits. We had a very large increase in deposits from underrepresented students of color. But as I've said to everybody, there's great uncertainty here. People are clearly still wondering, am I going to come or am I not? Is it safe? What's going to happen? And I'm not going to know until the 1st of September, as the world evolves, how many students are really going to show up on campus on September 2nd to take those courses and to be in Madison. So, we're doing everything we can to make this an experience students want to come to, and that is safe for them and for staff and for faculty. But, we're not in control of what's going on right now, as you all know. Let me segue for just my last slide here, my next to the last slide. In the middle of all of this, of course, there was a social revolution about racial justice and racial injustice. And we've been engaged in that discussion as well, both for our faculty and staff as well as our students. And it's not just about recruiting diverse students. And as I say, I appreciate all of the additional scholarship aid that we've been getting, but we have to be able to retain them. We have to make this campus a place where they feel like they belong. We're doing a number of things on that front. On the student front, we've implemented over the last several years training courses for incoming students, both undergraduates and graduates, on identity and bias and prejudice and living in a more diverse community and what that means. On the faculty level, we've got a very successful diversity recruitment strategy that's worked well over the last 2 years, and we're going to keep that going. But we're not where we need to be yet. And there's a lot more to be done on this front as well, and we can come back and talk about that under Q&A. So if you turn to the last slide, everything's uncertain. We don't know what our plans are going to be. But let me close with a little story. When we migrated classes online last fall, some of the toughest classes to think about how you're going to teach virtually are our performance classes, our music classes, our dance classes. Susan Cook, who's the director of the School of Music, was telling me how the semester went for her music faculty and students. She confirmed it wasn't ideal. People were not quite ready for that very fast shift to online learning. But she also said the following: the faculty are finding that technology can be their friend, and some of them who disregarded it in the past will admit that was a mistake. Students have learned to do things with technology they didn't know before. They're learning more about recording and editing and a host of things that they need to know about. It's making them better musicians and better consumers of music as well. Technology alone does not replace the residential, live, in-person, interactive experience that our students get at the University of Wisconsin. But there are some real benefits to using technology well. And one of the real opportunities coming out of this is many more of our faculty are going to use technology more extensively and thinking about how they can use it and how they can best combine it with that very precious classroom time when they're actually face-to-face with their students. So let me stop there. It's been a busy summer. It's going to stay busy. And I appreciate all of your support. And I'll open up for questions. Mike.
Well, Chancellor, I'm going to start with a question that I'm sure is on many of our viewers' minds. There was an announcement today from the Big Ten about the plan for fall sports. And, it wasn't the worst, but it probably wasn't the best, given that we were going to play Notre Dame at Lambeau Field this year. Could you tell us a little bit about, first of all, what was the announcement, but then how is that decision made? And are you confident that we will have a slate of 10 games in the Big Ten this year?
So the announcement that came out today is that the Big Ten will only play league games. That is, Big Ten to each other, but any games that were scheduled against non-Big Ten opponents will be canceled. Unfortunately, Wisconsin probably has the biggest non-league game of anyone. As many of you know, we were playing Notre Dame in Lambeau Field, and that is going to be on the cancellation list. There were some other big games, but they weren't in venues like Lambeau Field. So, there are a number of reasons for that. One, it gives us much better schedule control. The idea is we'll play 10 games, and it gives us more flexibility. It's also true that the Big Ten are all following exactly the same protocols about health and protection and behavior. And we just think it's better to play each other and to take the flexibility that is available by staying within the league. And we're in the everybody at this point is in the midst of trying to figure out what that schedule is going to look like, and that'll come out soon. The decision was a joint decision with the ADs and the presidents and chancellors. Each of us met separately. I think we both came to that conclusion separately. We then met together and reaffirmed that this is really what we wanted to do and why, and went out for an announcement. I will tell you that the announcement is very clear. It says if we play our fall sports, and this is not just football, this is all fall sports. If we play our fall sports, we are going to play them as league games. But I think there is still discussion about whether we can safely play fall sports, and that's a call that will be made later in July.
Do you have a date when that call might be made?
No.
Okay. I don't mean to hassle you. So we got a question from our friend Ron Luskin, who wonders how you're getting your hands on all of those supplies to do all the aggressive testing that you described. And, what is the expense of that for the university?
So, one of the ironies, of course, is just as all of our resources are down this year, it's cost us a lot more to run school this fall. And those are expenses we have to pay. We've got to have safety and health protocols first in mind. So, we're going to be ordering a lot of disposable masks. And, if a student forgets their mask or someone walks into a hallway and they don't have a mask on, there's got to be disposable masks pretty closely available. And similarly for our cleaning supplies and other things, putting up plexiglass in a lot of places, that sort of stuff. We are going to be doing our own testing. We're setting up a testing lab. We've got some great people in charge of this. We had to order some new equipment for that. We're going to be hiring people to run that lab. It's going to be doing 6,000 to 8,000 tests a week, which is what we think we need to do our full testing regime. This is not cheap. It will run into the tens of millions of dollars. We can do it more cheaply than we can contract it out. The price on the market for testing is still a lot worse. As Ron noted, one of the concerns is we have to make sure we get the supplies, and supplies have been a little short at times. They aren't right now. We've done a lot of advanced ordering, we've got some good relations with some of the other big testing companies nearby, including Exact Science and UW Health, and we're all going to work together on this one.
Great. Question from Alan Rubenstein. Will students be COVID tested just before they return home in November so families know that it's safe to bring them in?
That's not a question I've ever been asked before. Everyone asks me, do we have to test students before they come to campus? And we're actually working. We're not planning on doing that originally, but with this surge in cases, we're actually working on a protocol to see if we can test students as they arrive on campus. If you have a student and you think that you want them tested before you allow them back into your house on Thanksgiving, we will have the drop-in centers available on campus, and students can use that, or you can make them quarantine in their bedroom for a couple of weeks. Or, and I say this quite seriously, we're not closing our dorms and chasing people off campus. There are people who should stay on campus. Some of them are people who don't have access to high-speed internet connections in wherever their home is. Some of them are people who can't travel safely back to wherever it is their home is, or there are in some cases in some countries you literally just can't get a flight there right now. So if you think your child should stay on campus until a little bit later, they can do that too. We are not planning on doing testing of everyone before they go home, but like I say, the drop-in centers are available.
You give them a one-way bus ticket. No. Question from Anna.
Get home, they're fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a serious issue, but certainly understand our position on that. Question from Anna Shen, who notes that international students are really an essential part of the learning environment on campus. Can you address the university's response to the ICE rules on international students and how the university plans to ensure that they're able to safely continue their UW education?
Yeah, I was on the PBS NewsHour an hour ago talking about this. And what I quote there was, this is an incredibly unwise policy, and it's creating enormous chaos and difficulties for our international students. This is not a policy that had any consultation. We were all surprised, and it just doesn't make any sense. There are a lot of reasons why you want your international students on campus. Some of them are working with faculty. Some of them are doing research that requires the libraries and the laboratories that are here. It's to the benefit of your domestic students to be in classes with international students and have those sorts of exchanges that create diversity and ideas and thoughts that come when people from very different backgrounds talk together. And for many international students, it's either not safe to go home, or, as I say, you literally can't get home, or if you do get home, it's highly likely you won't come back. As I noted, a number of our international students stayed in the dorms when we closed things down last spring because they couldn't get home. And a number of them have stayed through the summer because they're very worried if they go home, they will not get back. Consulates are closed. It's very hard if something happens with your visa to get, and they're not issuing visas. And so students are here in the United States. If you want them to continue their education uninterrupted, they should be staying in the United States. And now the requirement to go home is only if you're taking no in-person classes. And if we are successful at running this fall with a hybrid model with both in-person and larger online classes, students who are international at UW-Madison should be able to stay on campus. But there's some schools that have announced they're not doing this. It's possible all of us may have to shut down at some point if things evolve in the wrong way in this nation with regard to infections. And this just adds further chaos and confusion to a pandemic situation where we should not be imposing these costs on a very valuable group of our population.
And important to the business too.
Yes.
So I'm going to combine a couple of audience questions from Mark, Ryan, and Dan. And Mark notes, it sounds like you thought of this, but what happens when an outbreak occurs? And Dan wonders, are there circumstances in which you might have to close again this fall before Thanksgiving? And what would trigger that? Have you thought about the thresholds?
Yeah, I don't think there's a college president in the country who's trying to open who hasn't thought about the fact that this, we may not make it to Thanksgiving. And it does depend on what happens, not just on campus, but in the community and the state and the country around us. And if the surge in cases would continue and keep growing, it's going to make it very hard to open campuses even in September. I very much hope that doesn't happen and that we're able to bring things under control as people go back to being more careful again and see much greater masking protocols and some restrictions about where you can go and how many people can gather. But we are prepared. There are going to be infections on campus, on both our students and our staff. That we're in a world where that's just a given, and we know that. As I say, it's we think the symptom monitoring is highly important to this. We want one of the reasons that we want drop-in testing available is if you find someone who has a symptom, you do the contact tracing immediately, and those people need to get tested as soon as possible. And that's where our testing availability in drop-in centers is so important. We will have isolation and quarantine facilities available for those on campus who need it, and who then have to spend 2 weeks doing some virtual learning and not going to their in-person classes. All of this has to work together. If we aren't able to enforce the masking requirements, if students go out and large numbers of students decide on Saturday night they're just going to go to the bars and interact with each other and with other people from the community and pay no attention to the health issues, we could well be in trouble, which is why our messaging, the social pressure, the peer support for making sure that these protocols are followed is so important. If infections occur, we've got to catch them early and do the contact tracing and isolation that's necessary. And we're geared up to do that. Is there a world where this could get beyond us? Yes. There's not a hard, bright line here. We certainly have talked through different situations as to would you or wouldn't you close in this situation. And, it's a judgment call that you have to make at that point in time.
Might you develop your own dashboard the way counties and municipalities have?
Yeah. No, we've talked about that.
Yeah. As an insider, I knew you did. Question from Jay Patrick. How does UW's approach to reopening and the protocols differ from some of the Big Ten peers? Are there areas in which you'd say we're notably different? And are there areas where you'd say everybody's going to require this?
A lot of things are very similar. I think it could be most of the Big Ten are all closing on Thanksgiving. That is common. All of us have the same protocols around masking and social distance and symptom monitoring. All of us are doing testing. The specifics of the testing regimes vary across campuses. Different campuses are doing different things. My sense is that Rutgers and New Jersey is under much stricter state orders than almost any other state, given the problems that they had there earlier, is probably being more cautious than any of the other Big Ten schools. And I don't know that they're having all of their students back on campus, that they're being a little bit more cautious about that, but I'd have to go look up the details of that. But if you look at the schools in the upper Midwest, we all look an awful lot alike in terms of what health protocols we're enforcing, how we're thinking about this, and how we're trying to message to our students.
If I can flip that around a little bit, Madison exists, or UW-Madison exists in a metropolitan area. Do you talk with the mayor regularly, and what do you hear about how the community feels about all the students coming back to campus? Because it seems like that's really another big issue of concern for us and why we need students to be safe.
So, in mid-April, the mayor, and I really appreciate this on her part, initiated weekly phone calls between herself, the head of the Dane County Public Health, the county executive, myself, the head of the K-12 Madison Metropolitan School District, and United Way, and UW Health as well. So we have been talking once a week, which is a very useful exchange of information as what's happening in each of our domains and how do we impact each other. There's a lot of concern about students on campus. Not surprising. Dane County, like other parts of the country, has seen an increase in cases. It's now coming down again a little bit, and I hope that continues. I've got a couple of comments here. One is that realize that a substantial share of our students are in Madison and will be in Madison, whether we have in-person classes or not. Our graduate students live there. They don't have another home. And a substantial share of our undergraduates have housing contracts off campus. A very high share of those students are planning to be here, regardless of what our announcements are about in-person or not in-person classes. So they're going to be in the community. Now, it is far safer, in my opinion, for us to have campus open, messaging to students, constantly bombarding them with, are you wearing your mask? Have you washed your hands? Are you keeping the community safe? Than in a world where everything's online, we're not sending any of those messages, and they're still in the community. So I actually think it is safer for the community to have the students engaged with the university with some in-person classes and presence on campus than otherwise.
Interesting point. Question from Sarah. What are the most significant long-term impacts that you foresee on the university coming out of the pandemic, good or bad?
Yeah, well, the bad one, and this is so unforecastable, is what's going to happen to us on the financial side. There is going to be another big, huge state budget cut. And, I'm willing to predict from everything I know that no state budget cuts ever get replaced at some point in the future. So, we're currently about 13, 14% state funded. We could go down to less than 10% state funded. We're not really a state, other than the fact the state regulates everything we do. We're certainly not a state funded organization very much anymore. And that's going to get even worse. And that will cause pain because we have to do budget cuts. That's our base budget. And when the state cuts us, we have to do budget cuts to relate to that. And that then has some long-term effects on maybe some programs get abolished. Some things become smaller, some things we don't do. On the positive side, there's at least two things that are really clear to me. One is that we've learned a lot about telework and about where telework can be used, and workers are just as productive as not. And I do think coming out of this, we're going to be really rethinking for those who want to use telework, for whom it makes sense, where can we use that more extensively? And that might actually increase productivity. It may solve some of our tightness in terms of facilities. So, that's one thing that's coming out of this. The other thing is on the education front. As you all know, I'm a huge believer in residential education and face-to-face interactions. All of that said, there are ways to use these technologies that can actually make physical classroom better. So I could imagine far more faculty coming out of this and starting to use what I call flipped classrooms, where they record the lectures and send the readings and the recorded lectures. Students are responsible for that outside of class. And the time in class is considered time for interaction and active learning, for working through problem sets, for using applications of this material to a new problem, for discussing the ideas in more detail and sparking off each other. So I do think faculty are going to be better at using these technologies in ways that make their classroom teaching even more effective. We'll see how that goes. And of course, we've jumped forward with online learning. We're, as many of you know, we're in the process of expanding our online options as well, and this will only help us on that front also.
Chancellor, you mentioned the state budget, and of course, important to all that is the fact that you've got a new president / governor / secretary. Tommy Thompson is our interim UW system president. Does that give you more confidence about how we might fare in the budget process to have a seasoned political veteran in that role right now?
Governor Thompson, I have to remember to call him President Thompson now, not Governor Thompson. Governor Thompson is indeed a seasoned veteran. He has connections everywhere in the state. I can't think of a better person to be the spokesperson for UW system and higher education in the state, and to be working with the governor and with the legislature on all of the issues that are going to be in front of us. Some of those are financial, some of those are regulatory. There's just a whole set of issues that we need to be talking about the legislature and need some policy changes or budget changes or whatever. And you couldn't have a better person in that job right now. So I was very pleased that they made that appointment for interim president.
Along those lines, another listener, Jimmy, wonders, how will the pandemic affect the other system campuses compared to its impact on us? Bigger, smaller? What's your take on that?
So it's interesting. Our multiple sources of revenue compared to the other campuses, which basically had state dollars and tuition, was always a real strength for us, right? But we're suddenly in a world where we're actually, relative to our standard budget, being hit worse than some of the other campuses because all of these other sources of revenue plummeted. And for the other state campuses, if their students come back, they have their tuition. We'll see what happens on the state budget's cut side, but they haven't been as badly affected yet as we have as a share of their budget. That said, we have a variety of additional levers and cushions and a little bit more reserve funding available. So, a smaller hit to them has a much bigger impact because they just don't have the reserves or the capacity to handle that. And, I am really worried for some of the schools in the system that particularly if we're not able to open school this fall, they will face a budget crisis that is far beyond ours, that may be an existential crisis as to whether they can continue and how. And, that will cause a lot of public debate.
I'm beginning to feel bad about a prediction I made at the outset of our comprehensive campaign, which is that we might be transferring more money to the university by the end of the campaign than the university is getting from the state. But I didn't want it to happen this way.
No.
With the state cuts coming, and it's terrible. Susie asked a question, how will we deal with libraries and study spaces to ensure that they're safe for student use?
So, we're just now looking at plans that the libraries have submitted to us for reopening. We have all through this time been able, you could order books and, pick them up. It's like takeout food, right? You can pick up your takeout library books if you know what door to go to and arrange a time to go pick it up. But we need to reopen some of those stacks because there's certain things that if you can't get into the stacks, you can't do the research. We are clearly going to limit the number of people in certain areas. We're absolutely requiring masking, doing special cleaning. The other thing that the libraries have available, as in their other spaces on campus like this as well, is places for students to sit and study. And, not everybody finds studying in their bedroom in a 4-person apartment or even in a dorm the best place to do their work. And we haven't had any space on campus that's open as study space. And, not only can you get quiet space, but of course you get great internet on campus. And so we are trying to figure out how will we reopen some of those study spaces. Chairs are going to be further apart. There may be plexiglass between sort of little stations in a number of cases, but we will need to reopen that, and we're in the process of doing that over late July, early August. By the time students come back, the protocols will be pretty clear.
We've had a couple strategic audio glitches just to demonstrate the value of face-to-face interaction tonight, Chancellor.
Yeah.
I hope the weather isn't going to disrupt us, but Sarah wonders, how do you think the pandemic might influence student interest in areas of study, and how might it influence the university's investment in different areas, majors, programs, maybe things that focus on data and or health?
So, it's a very well-observed phenomenon that when there is a major social disruption, the interest in that area by students soars. So I'm expecting to see a huge increase in interest in public health and health-related areas around the university, both at the graduate school level as well as at the undergraduate major level. And even among those who don't major in those fields, I could well see more people taking some of the classes that are available to freshmen or sophomores that are background intro classes. It's one reason we're offering that Wisconsin Experience course on pandemics, is we think there's going to be enormous interest. So, I in fact was talking to someone in public health and saying you've really got to prepare for a big increase in applications and interest in this coming couple of years. And that's good. It's good for the country.
Did he ask for more money?
No, but I'm sure they will. We don't have any
yet. Okay. Question from Fred Robertson, who notes that student expectations were greatly reduced at the end of last semester and grading was somewhat relaxed. Is that sort of endemic to online education, or was that something that happened because it was done with so little lead time? And is it possible for us to deliver a really high quality educational product online?
So there's some things that are easy to deliver online than others. Certain types of math classes that you actually have certain ways to drill online that may, be more effective than sitting in your room with textbook in front of you. Certain language classes that let you go back and go over things again and again in a lecture so that you can actually hear it, as opposed to listening to it once. So there, I don't want to say that online is always lower quality. That's clearly wrong. But there are a whole variety of activities where online is less engaging. Certainly all your performance art, much of your lab science. It's very clear that group interactions are different on video than they are in person. People are less spontaneous. They don't spark off each other as well. You don't see the full body, and without seeing someone's full body, you don't get the full message they're trying to convey. So, even just, discussions of key issues in a humanities class are better and different in person than they are online and in distance learning. I am a very strong believer, as I say, in in-person residential education, which doesn't say that you can't use online experiences and certain types of educational things very well as a mix to be part of that. And I don't know how student expectations will change. I think, students are more used to online activities than some of our older people are here. In general, they're more open to it. They are more adept at it. So, my sense is there's going to be a bigger change among our faculty age 40 and over in their use of online and technologies than there is in our students age 30 and younger.
So I'm going to go to a final question from Sarah, and then I might have a follow-up for you. We'll see. So Sarah wonders, how can alumni be most helpful to UW right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. One answer is if you know students, whether it's your children or your neighbor's children or your relatives' children who are on campus, I do hope you'll stay in touch with them. This is a very anxious time for a lot of our students, as it is for some of our faculty and staff. The world is simply unpredictable right now. It's changed fast. It's not changed in ways that people like. And, you really do see a lot more anxiety and depression and mental health issues. And so if you know people on campus, and particularly our students, take them out to lunch, reach out to them, stay in touch with them. That's comment number one. Comment number two is, particularly those of you who live in the state of Wisconsin, messaging to your elected leaders the value of this institution and your hope that though we understand the state is in deep financial difficulty and there will be cuts, that the university will be treated proportionally with other agencies. And as our share of state funding goes down, the state does need to release some regulations and give us a little bit more ability to control our own fate. That's number two. And number three, and I'm going to say this, alumni generosity matters. Whether you're sending us $10 or whether you're sending us $1,000, that really does help. It helps for student scholarships, and many students are going to need financial aid in this next year or so, because families who become unemployed, thought they had a plan for how they're going to pay for college, and suddenly they can't. Anything that you can do to help the emergency funding or the regular scholarship funding, it would really going to be greatly appreciated. That and just, your ongoing support and cheers for the university.
That is a great closing message, Chancellor. From the beginning of this crisis, we've kind of had the mantra at the Foundation and Alumni Association that on the other side of this, there will be a greater appreciation for research and community. And, we really believe that the University of Wisconsin-Madison is exemplary in those two dimensions. That's what makes it a really special place. And, we all know crises can disrupt the hierarchy of industries or sectors. They're very critical junctures for all the players in any industry. And, we need to emerge stronger and better. And we definitely need the support of alumni to do that in all the ways that you just mentioned. So, we're in close contact with our alumni and friends. And, we would ask that they would continue to think about the university as a place that does great work. It certainly has great needs right now, greater than ever before, given the situation. And we hope that if we can band together, as Badgers like to do, we might emerge stronger in our sector on the other side of this. I'm certainly hopeful of that. Well, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks to everyone who joined us this evening.
Yeah, I want to thank our audience. We had some really great questions and participation tonight. It's always a pleasure to be with you. I look forward to, we've got 2 programs next week, Tuesday, and then another special program on Thursday. Tuesday, we'll be talking about the future of retail, and Thursday, we'll talk about sort of the history and future of diversity and inclusion at UW-Madison with some campus leaders. So I hope you can join us for those programs. Thanks for being with us tonight, and on Wisconsin.